Well, it is good to be a man, chapter 6, talking about toxic sexuality. Toxic sexuality. And the best part of chapter 6 was talking about toxic femininity. Not toxic femininity, toxic feminism. Toxic feminism. Elena, you'll never be a toxic feminist because you're going to learn the right way, right? Yes, I will. Okay, good. Toxic feminism. Oh, it's bad stuff. He starts out, just to summarize in chapter 6, the author says, masculinity can be bad and good. Mostly we hear today about toxic masculinity, but masculinity can be good or bad depending on which way it goes. When it's oriented towards serving God, it's very good. When masculinity follows Cain instead of Abel, it becomes very toxic. Also, true femininity is also very good. But evangelicals forbid you, and we all know this, forbid you to talk about toxic femininity or toxic feminism. Loud, immodest women, as Proverbs describes, have led many soft beta males astray. Even men as wise as Solomon. Solomon, come on, people. If Solomon can be led astray, you can too. All right. This is because, like Cain, they worship themselves instead of pursuing God's dominion and God's plan. He says that some men think they are too wise, that toxic femininity wouldn't work on them. And he says, don't be so sure. Millions of smart men have been led astray by it. Are you wiser than Solomon? Just because you know how to avoid harlots and hussies doesn't mean you know how to avoid Satan's daughters. Ooh, man. The obvious traps are not just there to trap the simple. And so he talks about what are those traps. He also, this is another good point he made in the chapter, he also talks about Miss Sandberg. She was the CEO of a company, I forgot which company it was, I don't know if it was, I think she was high up at Google, Miss Sandberg. And she gave advice to the women of Google and said, hey, you need to get a man who doesn't get in the way of the wife's ambitions. And so she said, have your fun when you're young with the alpha males, but then settle down with a nice beta male, because if you get an alpha, then they'll buck against your demands and manipulations. And so he writes that Miss Sandberg, like all loud women, eventually settle on a compliant beta male who knows who really wears the pants in the family. Right? Happy wife, happy life. Happy wife, happy life. Elena, you doing okay here? Elena's looking concerned. She's like, oh my goodness, is this really how it is, Daddy, out here? Yes, it is. Oh, so bad. So bad. Don't worry, Elena. We're getting it turned around. We're getting it turned around. Don't be concerned. We're getting it turned around. Okay. All right, here we go. He says in the chapter, toxic feminism or toxic femininity is taboo in the church because we see women as always being pure. Women are always pure. They don't have responsibility. It's always the men who have all the responsibility and not the women. They are just the pure angels in the modern evangelical church. We see them like that. We would never see an adulterous woman as being a predator on men. But this is the way that Proverbs describes the adulterous woman. And actually, the adulterer in Scripture is almost always seen as a woman. It is hardly ever seen as a man. Here, cover your ears, Lynn. Cover your ears. Okay. Yeah, I'm talking about this. Is bad stuff. I'm talking about this. It's hardly ever seen as a man, the adult. It's almost always seen as a woman, a predatory woman. There you go. Cover your ears, Lynn. All right. I know it's bad, isn't it? You won't be like that. I know she won't be like that. All right. The author says Satan uses his daughters to destroy God's sons. Ooh, man. Ooh, that's tough language. Tough language there. The feminine immorality comes mostly in the form of immodesty. Immodesty. Now, that's pretty profound. You don't hear anybody really today talking about immodesty, the modesty, because that is part of purity culture. Oh, no, don't ever talk about purity culture. What? I'm responsible for what I wear? Oh, I should be being modest? No. Men should just control their primal urges, blah, 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 whatever. I know. Well, you're looking at me like, what's going on here? I know. Isn't that crazy? I know it's crazy. Right? Immodesty. That is what the loud women, the tool of the loud woman. Here's what he says in the book. Harlotry in the church is rampant today. Yoga pants, short skirts, Daisy Dukes, low-cut tops, caked-on makeup are the obvious forms of immodesty. And we know Katy Perry told us, Daisy Dukes, bikinis on top. Yes, she works for the devil. Yes, she works for the devil. I kissed a girl and I liked it. You know she works for the devil. She even says it. Immodesty. And he says this immodesty goes unmentioned and unchallenged in churches across the Western world. How did we get to such a low point? How did we get there? Because we view women as always pure. They can do no wrong in the church and in society at large. He says in the chapter, this toxic woman, she has a loud spirit, a loud heart. She may not necessarily have a loud mouth, like she speaks loudly, but she has a loud heart and a loud spirit. Unlike what 1 Peter says, that women should have a gentle and quiet spirit. Gentle and quiet spirit. That is not what Ms. Sandberg from Google describes, wouldn't you know? And so he says these loud women, they should be submitted to their own husbands and build up their own homes. Submitted to their husband's mission. They should be a sub to the mission of the husband in submission. They should build up their own homes. This loud woman, she tears down her own household with her own hands, is what Proverbs says. He quotes Proverbs 14:1. She tears down her own house with her own hands. And Pastor Foster says in chapter 3 that as goes the household, goes all of society, and we see that with our nation filled with such women today. And if we fill the church up with them, they will tear down God's house as well. And so, it's good to be a man because we are getting it corrected and Christ is winning. He is building his church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Until next time, this is the Postmillennial Man and Baby.